Analytics don't work. Smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics.
The analytics don't mean anything in football. Take those numbers and you can make them say whatever you want.
The numbers, basically. What do they mean?
Welcome back to the Noise Podcast. Live from Queens, New York, we are in episode 3 of the show. This season, we are pulling back the curtain on the grind of betting an entire NFL season. With an analytical approach, real-time reactions, and an honest look at the highs and lows, each episode gives you a seat at the table as the NFL season unfolds. Whether you're betting alongside us or just here for the sweat, welcome back to the Noise. So I started last week's show with some positives about Roger Goodell's product and how we looked, and I kind of have a very different tune this week. I was not really happy with the decision-making that we saw. I think some of the coaching that we're seeing, especially on the offensive side, I mean, you're kind of getting to a point where how do these guys have jobs? You know, Too High Shell has obviously been dominating the NFL for the last couple of years, and certain teams have simply just not figured out how to beat it. Teams are incredibly one-dimensional. Teams have been struggling to move the ball, to score the ball, and most, critically, making good decisions when the game is on the line or making the correct decision in crunch time, time management, things like that. So we'll get into that a little bit later on. We'll kind of talk through some of these games specifically. We'll talk about, some bad beats that we had over the last couple of weeks. And as we go through it, we'll kind of identify some spots where, teams are going to have to get a serious downgrade because we just can't trust certain coaches. So as we mentioned, bad beats. This has been a difficult start to the season for me. And obviously, as we're kind of taking an autopsy of an NFL season, we want to, understand what that means, how that looks. Denver, right? If you watched the show last week, Denver was our highest leverage play. We were all over Denver. Like I mentioned, I don't think Indy, should be rated this high. I think Denver got a little bit too much of a downgrade or whatever just because of the Titans game. And you're the Denver team where you're up by 2. You go for I believe 42-yard field goal and miss it off the upright, right? That's an opportunity to go up 5. When you're holding -1, -1.5, -2 tickets, you're kind of needing that. You're kind of needing that cushion. But next thing's next. Daniel Jones gets the ball back. They're only able to set up for a 60-yard field goal. Miss the 60-yard field goal. We're celebrating. It's a good win. And then the flag comes out, and they call a leverage penalty on Denver, which allows the Colts to move up to the 45 to a 45-yard kick, re-kick, and naturally make the kick, winning the game by 1. So if you were like me or anyone in the Discord that we were all over Denver, that was tough. That was a tough outing. And this is now, for me at least, this is two weeks in a row that my highest leverage position, ironic leverage right there, but my highest leverage position has been taken down by what I would consider a bad beat, right? I'm not mad about betting Denver, with a very short spread against an Indy team that I still don't want to rate that highly. I'm not mad about betting a Baltimore team against the Bills, where Baltimore dominated 3.5 quarters of that game. They choked that away. We talked extensively about John Harbaugh's decision making in that game, and at the end of the day, you can't be too frustrated, when these things happen. And yeah, it sucks when it happens twice in a row, and nobody wants to lose their bet, but this is part of the calculus that you have to do, right? When you have a tough Sunday, you have a really bad beat, you lose a bunch of money because your biggest position goes belly up. How does that affect you? How does that affect your psyche? And, how do you move on to the next thing, right? As you know, Sunday night, that's when the lines come out. We talked about this last week as well. That's when you're getting your first adjustment off the look-ahead lines, your first opportunity to actually get some real information and bet into the next week's lines. if you're tilted all day on Sunday and you don't want to look at the lines, you're going to miss those opportunities. If you are starting to chase because you had losses that you're thinking that you need to cover by next week, this is also going to get you in trouble. So I think it's very important to kind of remove yourself from the emotional element of it. Yes, it's losing money. Yes, it is extremely frustrating. The most common phrase that I use about talking about the NFL is, do we really bet on this? Is this really something that we do, right? When you have such a short sample size with so few games only once a week, you're always going to have some outcomes that are just unexpected, and they are going to be big swings in your bankroll and your overall performance. So I think it's really, really important to take a step back sometimes. Remember your bankroll management, even though it's your highest leverage play of the day, even though it's, my biggest bet, my quote unquote whale lock or whatever you want to use. You lose those sometimes, and you cannot allow yourself to to stop your process. Obviously, if you need to make adjustments to your process, we'll get there, right? If we have another week where we're not betting the market correctly, or we're so far off the market, we're gonna have to take a look at what we're looking at and try to figure out what other people are looking at that are making them profitable or making them more in tune with the market. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to do the show in this way, in this style of, let's really take this week by week and start to understand how that looks, and show you guys, right, how to make adjustments on the fly in real time. We're not there yet, right? We're still going to be a little bit headstrong, because I do think that we made the right decisions on our plays. So we're going to kind of go into week 3 just considering a little bit of caution with, perhaps some of these teams are should be rated differently, and we don't know all the answers yet. So we'll let this play out a little bit. And sometimes my last point about bad beats and bad luck is, you have to remember where the good luck happens, right? Let's say you had Buffalo in week 1, and you were all over Buffalo, and you are Buffalo is a much better team than Baltimore. If that was the position that you took, don't use that game to kind of exemplify yourself, right? Don't say that you had the absolute right process because you knew that Josh Allen was going to come down from a 3-score deficit, and you knew that the Ravens were going to choke it, right? That's not an analytical approach. That is not something that's going to be profitable long term. In the short term, on a game by game basis, the outcomes are they're A and B, right? You either win or you lose your bet. So it's hard to remove yourself from the concept of, well, I won, so it must be good, and if I lost, it must be bad. That's not always true. Again, the point being, when you think about this over a large sample size, it's important to recognize that making the right, quote unquote, right play, or the better play, that's what's going to keep you profitable over time. So don't run to say that because you want to bet in week 1 or week 2 that's the right thing to do. You still want to be very cautious and kind of understand your approach to the market. And remember, the good luck, and your biggest advantage as a bettor is not betting, right? The sportsbook must price every game, every prop, everything they offer. They must price it out and put it out there for the market to bet it. Your advantage as a bettor is you don't have to bet everything. If you don't find an advantage, then you don't play it. And I mean, a great example for us, at least, is the Arizona game. Arizona was up by, I think, 3 scores, and the Panthers have this miraculous backdoor cover where, they had interceptions, and Kyler Murray threw an interception, and they had no business covering that game, but they did. And this is not a game that we were on. This is not a bad beat from my pockets specifically, but for anybody that laid it with Arizona, or especially anybody that laid it live looking at how the Panthers looked, that's a bad beat. That's a really tough one. And if you had that and Denver in pocket last week, you'd be pretty upset by 8 p.m. on Sunday. So just want to be cautious with stuff like that. And, thinking about that Cardinals game, right, this was a great chance for us to get some action on it and bet the over. I think Bryce Young and the Panthers are going to continue to be this model. You saw it a little bit last year where they go down big in games because the defense is terrible. Bryce Young is not good yet. I still hold out a little bit of belief because he has shown ability to move the offense. Just it's only in a 2-minute or 4-minute drill. He's just incapable of doing it at the beginning of a game for whatever reason. So I'm not ready to, give up on him as a prospect yet, but the Carolina Panthers are bad. But if you have a team like Arizona who ended up being very banged up in the secondary, they let up a ton of points. And I think the Panthers are going to continue to be a team that is going to come back and is going to put up some late points against a softer defense like Arizona. So for our perspective, right, we bet into that live, right? We took a couple live numbers at between 40 and 45, and that all ended up cashing. I mean, any live over was good last week, right? You were, I think, 14-2 to the over or something like that. But that was in the Discord, and this is, again, the best place to get any of my bets are in the Discord. You will get the bets in real time. We are in the chat every Sunday as the games go on. I'm putting my live thoughts in there. I'm putting my live bets in there. And then naturally, as we mentioned, Sunday night, as soon as the lines are out and we're able to bet for next week, that's when I'm getting my first action down. So again, Discord is the only place to get all of my bets in real time. So I'll put the Discord link in the description. Of course, it's attached to all of our socials as well, so make sure you jump in the Discord. So as we move into week 3 and what we're betting on week 3, I think it's an important time to think about what have we learned so far? What have we learned in 2 weeks, and how do you use 2 weeks worth of data to have consideration into what's changed from your priors, right? When you look at a team like Denver, who we were pretty sure that they shouldn't have been downgraded, or, Indy shouldn't have been upgraded to the extent that, they took money against Denver. But seeing how Denver got carved up by Daniel Jones and Shane Steichen, is it time for us to downgrade Denver's defense? That's a legitimate question that we're asking ourselves, right? That pass rush was not as effective as I expected it to be. The secondary was really bad. We know Pat Surtain is banged up. We know Riley Moss is a bit of a up and down player, to put it lightly. But if you would have told me that Daniel Jones was going to go right after Pat Surtain, the reigning defensive player of the year, and carve up the Denver defense, I would have been very, very surprised. And that's exactly what we got. I'm not saying that the Colts are going to be a bad team, and I wouldn't suggest that they aren't, they're below average on offense. I think Daniel Jones is capable enough, and especially in a really good system with really, really good skill players, this is the best case. This is the best opportunity for Daniel Jones to actually, make something of his NFL career. That being said, if Denver doesn't start to look a little bit better, especially in week 3 where they have another difficult matchup against the Chargers, we're going to have some serious consideration on whether or not we think this defense is better than average. And again, I don't want to jump the gun because it's only 2 weeks, and they were getting their feet wet against the Titans, even though they had 6 sacks. They go up against this machine perhaps in Indianapolis that is carving everybody up. Let's see how they look against the Chargers. Chargers who they themselves have really changed their offensive identity, which we've been calling for, right? Especially last year when John Harbaugh took over, trying to get the talent, trying to utilize the talent of Justin Herbert, having Ladd McConkey out there. They have some talent, and now we're kind of in this pass-first, pass-happy offense, which we've been calling for from the Chargers to utilize Justin Herbert. I guess Quentin Johnston is an NFL player. That's news to me, but I'm happy for him, right? They wasted first-round capital on that guy. Ladd McConkey has been great. Omarion Hampton has not broken out yet, but what's the most, I don't want to even say surprising, but what's the most impactful thing to me is that the pass protection has been great. We were really concerned about Rashawn Slater missing, the entire year. How are they going to account for that? And then going up against, what's a a pretty decent pass rush in Vegas, and what we expected to be a decent pass rush in Kansas City, they've held up pretty well. And, they get another tough matchup with Denver, who I still have rated in my top 5 of defenses. But, again, we might be coming to a situation where it's time to give them a downgrade. While I don't have any bets for that game coming up, and I do want to jump into some of the week 3 stuff, I think the most important takeaway from that game is Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll with talking about the Denver and Vegas game. What are we doing? We are the Raiders were incredibly one-dimensional. They could not move the ball. They were unable to do anything in the red zone. Geno Smith was really, really poor. I mean, missing a ton of passes, missing touchdown opportunities. I was not pleased with that performance. And while I do think the Chargers defense is good, and I'm okay with the market rating on where they're at, I think Vegas had plenty of opportunities to score the ball. And probably the most egregious thing that we saw in week 2 was the 11-minute, 19-play drive that ended in a field goal while the team was down 14. So you wasted almost an entire quarter of an NFL game. You ran 19 plays, and it resulted in you making a 2-score game a 2-score game. This is abhorrent, horrific, awful decision-making, coaching. Everybody. I mean, I was sitting there saying everybody in this room should be fired. Yes, I know it was 4th and 12. It was going to be difficult, but what's the point? What's the point of kicking that field goal? Go for it. You're in the same spot. If anything, you go for it, you don't get it. They're further down the field. You kick the field goal, and now you kick off. And you have an opportunity maybe for the Chargers to have a nice run back, or to be able to get the ball up the field. If you go for it, you put yourself in a position to actually come back in this game, right? Even though you wasted 11 minutes, you're still in a 2-score game. There is no purpose of being in the 4th quarter and making a 2-score game a 2-score game. You've done nothing but waste time. That was very frustrating. We were on the Raiders. I think a lot of my optimism about the Raiders is waning quickly. I was not happy with Chip Kelly. Has Chip Kelly watched an NFL game since he was booted from the league in 2016? Is he unsure about what we're doing? I was incredibly surprised about how poor they looked. And again, I'm not running to upgrade the Chargers, although I am happy to see their offense really kind of getting into the gear that we thought they could based on the talent. I'm really, really avoiding Vegas going forward just because I'm horribly afraid of outdated NFL coaches, names that are just names at this point, not being able to execute a game plan in the year 2025. So, week 3. Let's talk first. My first game that I want to go over is the Green Bay Packers and the Cleveland Browns. The Browns are taking some money. I'm a little bit surprised to see that. We know they have Myles Garrett. We know the pass rush is going to be good, but right now, Green Bay Packers look like an absolute unit. The defense looks really scary with Micah Parsons being plugged in and ramping up. The pass rush is incredible. The coverage we had some question marks about, but has held up pretty much the first couple weeks, and they're taking away big plays. That's kind of what the defense is designed to do. They want to lean heavy on the pass rush, and so far they have looked really, really good. That being said, they're going up against what's barely an NFL offense at this point. Joe Flacco, although we love him and we kind of like the gunslinger attitude that he brings sometimes. It's he's not better than an average quarterback. He's still a minus in that department. The skill room is not good. They are their offense is extremely conservative because it has to be, and there's not much that they can really do. So my question is, how do they score? right? This is a team that put up 16, 17 points against the Bengals defense, which we could consider a bit of a pass funnel. And I'm just not sure how they put up points against Green Bay. And they took money. So, sometimes this is an opportunity to take a look at the market and think about, what's the market doing that you do or don't agree with. In this case, right, we opened up pretty heavy on the Packers, where you saw some 9s out there, some 8.5s, and this has gotten bet all the way down. I mean, if you look offshore, you can find a 7. There's 7.5s pretty readily available in market with minimal juice. So obviously, right, the Packers are going to be a great teaser spot. Low total game between 7.5 and 8.5. Right, this is going to be anchor leg for teasers everywhere. This is not really a game that I'm looking at for Survivor, just because I think there's a ton of future equity in the Packers. I might use them in one entry just to move my exposures around, but as of now, this is not going to be a Survivor play for me. But I don't know how they score. This is 41.5. I think under is probably fine. I think Browns team total is probably fine. But the way that I'm going to approach this game is I'm very interested in what the Browns did last week, where they ended up bringing in Dylan Gabriel for I think a series or two towards the end of the game, blowout game, right? 41-17 victory for the Ravens in week 2. I kind of have I kind of think that the Browns are going to do this more often. I think the Browns are going to let Dylan Gabriel spell Joe Flacco. There's kind of no point in having Flacco get beat up out there for 4 quarters, right? The team's already 0-2. They're projected to be one of the worst teams in the league. I think they're going to continue to be so, and there's really no point in not letting your rookies play. It is a little early in season to move towards a Dylan Gabriel or Shador Sanders as your starter probably, but I think as the losses start to pile for the Browns, and as Joe Flacco still tends to take more and more hits at his age, they're gonna consider moving off of him a little bit. So not every book has this up just because of this uncertainty, but you can find passing props for Joe Flacco in the 220s, 225, 226 at a couple books. I think, as we mentioned, also the Packers are really good at limiting the big plays. So to see his longest pass totals, in the low 30s, that is lower than what they tend to be, right? You're more looking at a 34, 35 for Flacco as someone who, will sling it downfield. I like the under on the longest pass completion, but what I really like is the under passing yards for Flacco. I think not only do they have a very hard time, they have no point in throwing the ball too much, especially early, right? They really want to keep the ball on the ground as much as possible to avoid that killer pass rush, and also to try to keep time away from the Green Bay offense, keep their defense off the field. I think the passing prop is probably priced fine if Flacco was definitely going to play the whole game. But I think you can very easily get into a game script where Flacco's not throwing the ball or Flacco's not in the game, right? If the Green Bay Packers are up 28-0 at some point, maybe we see Dylan Gabriel. So although I like the 41.5, I do think the Packers will take the foot off the gas at some point, just not needing to have their A team out there, or not having to put max effort trying to get through this game. I really like the Joe Flacco under 226.5 is the best I see in market right now. We'll confirm these numbers in the Discord as well. Next game we're looking at, we have a battle between 2 backup quarterbacks, and it's only week 3. We are looking at the Bengals going into Minnesota to where we have Jake Browning, who's playing for Joe Flacco, who has a turf toe incident, and we are getting Carson Wentz for J.J. McCarthy in Minnesota. Let's start by considering a quarterback rating matrix, right, where Joe Burrow is clearly the top quarterback in this cluster, right? Next is Jake Browning. Jake Browning is much better than J.J. McCarthy. And although we haven't seen Carson Wentz in a little while, I don't think he's anything better than serviceable. J.J. McCarthy has been absolutely terrible through 2 weeks. There was really not much that made him stand out to me. So I don't want to say that Carson Wentz is an upgrade just because it is Carson Wentz. He is older. He hasn't been a starter in the league for many years, and there's a reason why. I don't want to say it's an upgrade, and especially because, he's only been on the team for like 3 weeks. He's probably rated pretty low. And that would mean that Jake Browning is a significant step up from either one of these quarterbacks. And again, when you have a quarterback-driven league where market ratings are very heavily weighted on quarterback, I'm highly surprised that the Vikings are 3-point favorites. There were some 3.5s that even popped up at some point throughout the week that I think are mostly gone now. But I'm playing the Bengals. I'll take the 3 points. I'll take the money line. The biggest thing for the Bengals, right, is the defense is not really good. The pass defense, the coverage numbers look okay right now, but I think a lot of that is skewed by some kind of lucky interceptions that they got against Jacksonville in week 2. They played the Browns in week 1, who are terrible. So I don't think that this is a good defense. They do have a halfway decent pass rush with, Trey Hendrickson last year was the league leader in sacks. Let's not forget. So when you look at Minnesota, you see a ton of injuries, right? They are very, very banged up on the offensive line. Ryan Kelly is not likely to play. Justin School not likely to play. The positive for them is they probably do get Christian Darrisaw back. Not exactly sure how he will look and how he'll fare in this one, but at least they have that. They have multiple injuries in the secondary. Andrew Van Ginkel coming off a concussion, starting cornerback out, safeties out. This is a ton of injuries for a Vikings defense that, was supposedly pretty good this year. Was looking to be pretty good this year. I'm a little bit concerned with their ability to stop Jake Browning, and I don't think that we're gonna get this like traditional backup quarterback game where they're not able to move the ball that much. They run a much more conservative play style. I mean, Jake Browning was fine last year, in place of Joe Burrow. I think he's an aggressive quarterback. He's going to make downfield throws. I wouldn't project a big downgrade for Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I think Zach Taylor's offensive scheme is okay, right? He also has a tendency to have some issues with decision making, but I think the offense overall is probably going to be okay. It's really Minnesota that I'm concerned with, where, again, Carson Wentz is not an upgrade at this point in time, but J.J. McCarthy was really bad, and I don't think they're going to be able to open up the playbook. I don't think Kevin O'Connell is going to get the looks that he wants to get using Carson Wentz, and with Aaron Jones going on IR, this is going to be a kind of one-dimensional attack with Jordan Mason. And while Cincinnati's defense is nothing to write home about, I think, this is a spot where Minnesota could continue to struggle offensively, as so far they've been one of the worst teams in the league. So let's not run to say that Carson Wentz is going to be better. Let's not run to say that Jake Browning is a massive downgrade. I think that this is a game that should be pretty close to even. I mean, it depends on how you rate the home field for Minnesota. It comes down to what you rate the home field advantage for Minnesota to be. Maybe 1.5, maybe 2. It's not 3 points. So if you're saying that it's 1.5, right, and on a neutral, Minnesota would be minus 1.5 against this Cincy team, I think that's wrong. I'm not ready to say that Minnesota is any better than Cincinnati overall, especially with all the injuries, right? As these guys start to come back, when the offensive line is shored up, when the defense gets some of their playmakers back, then I think, you have a better case. But as of right now, I don't think that Minnesota should be this big of a favorite. So I'm taking the 3. I'm taking a bit of the money line. I don't mind the over at 41.5. We'll see what that looks like come Sunday. Maybe it's an opportunity for a live over, just depending on, when we get a look at Carson Wentz and that offense. If they're able to move the ball, that might be a way to play off of the Bengals bet, right? We're kind of betting that they're going to be able to get to the quarterback. They're going to be able to keep up with scoring. And, if that's not the case, maybe we look to pivot. But I think an over could be a look if Carson Wentz is moving the ball, because I don't think Browning and the Bengals are going to have that issue. So, in a game where they don't win and cover is a game where Carson Wentz goes out and puts up 28 points. And if we see that as something that, is in the realm of possibility, we'll know that live. And I think, betting a live over is going to be a look for us in that game. Next game I want to run through is the Houston Texans at Jacksonville Jaguars. Houston had a very, very tough one on Monday night, losing to the Tampa Bay Bucks. A game they could have won, right? They left too much time on the clock for Baker. He was kind of aided by some mistakes by Houston. And, if you were in a position where, you have him basically almost sacked on a play and he's able to run for 15 yards and keep the game going. That was tough to watch for Houston fans. Anyone that was backing Houston, that was a pretty bad beat as well. We played some Tampa Bay teasers, right? So we were kind of covered there, regardless of the outcome of that game, whether they made it on that drive or not, getting enough points. And I think Houston is always a team where getting a teaser leg in is probably going to be a good thing, because they have an elite defense, a top 3 defense, great pass rush, great coverage led by Stingley, good run stop. But this offense is just continuously in the shitter. I mean, we talked at length last year about Bobby Slowick being, a pretty bad OC and not able to unlock all the talent that we have on this Houston Texans roster. And as we come into 2025 with, some of that talent depleted, whether it be through injury, right, with Tank Dell is out, Christian Kirk has been out, they are not able to get anything going, and it's even worse this year without some of the talent to kind of bring them up. Nico Collins is reasonably a top 10, perhaps top 5 wide receiver in the league. CJ Stroud has the ability to be a top 10 quarterback, even if his numbers are not suggesting it right now. I'm not sure how, I'm just not sure how they can continue to be such a poor offense, especially as they get guys coming back. Now, that being said, this is where we are right now, and we haven't really seen any signs of any offensive growth for this team. So I'm looking at the under here. Jacksonville was a team that I talked about coming into the year as having a lot of upside, right? They made some moves on the defense, and the pass rush has looked good. The coverage has looked better. I'm not buying it, though. I think although I took the position on Jacksonville that they might be good, and I do have alternate win totals in pocket, I'm not really high on this Jacksonville team right now. I do not think Trevor Lawrence has looked good. I think he's missed a lot of throws, bad interceptions. He's been a concern so far. And again, we're only expecting him to be somewhere rated in the middle. They have great weapons with Brian Thomas, who they can't seem to get going. They've put up some pretty good offensive performances so far this year, but I'm not really believing it yet. They've played very soft defenses in Cincy and Carolina. I'm not buying into the Jaguars just yet. So in this game, right, where you could make an argument that they shouldn't be favored, right? I don't give Jacksonville any home field advantage, maybe a half a point. Similar to this Vikings matchup where, you're implying that they would be favored over the Texans on a neutral. I don't think that's right. I'd be happy to bet the Texans, but where I'm going in this game is on the under. I bet under 44.5. If there's ever going to be a game that the Houston Texans get it going offensively, it's going to be this game, because I don't think Jacksonville's defense is that good. But I think we're in, again, this is kind of what we talked about a couple minutes ago, where how much have we actually learned in week 2 or in week 3? We see the Jaguars putting up decent numbers. We see the Texans defense being really good. This is kind of strength on strength, but I think the Jaguars are a little fickle. I think the Houston offense has a ton of potential because of the star power that they have, but their scheme continues to hold them back. So this is a great kind of example of, if things go differently, we obviously, we might look like an idiot here, right? I might look like an idiot taking the under if this is the game that Trevor Lawrence plays to the peak of his potential. This is the game that the Houston Texans offense finally starts to connect. While that is in the realm of possibility, I'm not buying it. I think the under is the play here, and I think if you like a side, if you want to bet a side, it's Houston, and I think live might be a look for me just because I'd like to get a handle on how the offense looks if they get Christian Kirk back, which at the time of recording, I don't know if he's going to play this weekend. So I'll be looking at that live again in the Discord this weekend, but I did bet the under at 44.5. All right. And last thing to go over for week 3 is my survivor pick. We barely, and I mean barely, survived week 2 with the Dallas Cowboys. Like I mentioned on the show, I did use some Ravens. I did use some Rams last week as well. But my survivor pick that I'm tracking on the show, which is week 1, was the Arizona Cardinals. Week 2, Dallas Cowboys. That was a really, really sweaty game. I am not quite sure how we escaped that. We got nth percentile game out of Russell Wilson. When have we seen Russell Wilson throw multiple 30-yard bombs and it go well? I thought it was 2021. Yeah, they do have a great wide receiver one in Malik Neighbors. I think Wan'Dale Robinson is decent. They were out of control against Dallas. Dallas's defense, especially without Darren Bland, is incredibly soft. They got no pressure on Russell Wilson, and they were beat over the top multiple times. I am highly concerned with Dallas, but I guess a question also I want to pose out there. When you're going to overtime, right? If you don't know, there's new rules in the NFL over the last couple of years, kind of following that Josh Allen game against the Chiefs in the playoffs. You are now allowed, or both teams are going to get the ball regardless of the outcome of the first drive, right? If you kick a field goal or you score a touchdown, the other team's going to get the ball. And once the first drive is over, now we're in sudden death. What I thought was interesting, and I have seen a little bit of back and forth discourse on this, so I'm not sure what's the quote unquote sharp side. If you're Russell Wilson and the Giants, you elect to you elect to kick off in overtime, and the announcers immediately say, well, yeah, you want to know what you need to get. And I'm not quite sure I agree with that. I think you should be aggressive and go for the score because you have to get a stop regardless. If you let up a field goal, right, to Brandon Aubrey, who can kick a 65-yard field goal on the first drive, well, then, yeah, you need to score, right? It doesn't matter whether he scores or not. You need to score. And if you're the if you are electing to kick it, you're electing to receive the ball first, you also need to score. Right? You don't want to give them the ball back without scoring, right? Because now you're in sudden death, and now your defense is exposed to the Cowboys only needing a 65-yard field goal, which again, Brandon Aubrey has the leg to make. Why would you not get the ball and score first? That to me doesn't make any sense. I'm curious to know what you guys think about that. Comment below. Let me know if I'm off base here, and maybe there's a sharp example for why you should you should kick it off. I'd love to know, because to me, I think it's idiotic. I think you got to go aggressive. You got to go win the game. But back to the survivor point. With our pick this week, we are going with the Seattle Seahawks. So this is a good, you might be a little bit surprised to hear that, right? But this is a good example to talk about how we're approaching Survivor as a contest. So the most important thing to think about, right, is the leverage during the week, right? Seattle is likely to be anywhere between 30 and 50% used in your pool. By picking Seattle, you gain little to no inherent leverage over your pool. That's true. But next, we want to talk about future equity. As we mentioned with the Packers a couple minutes ago, I think you can use the Packers in multiple spots later on in the year. Seattle Seahawks, while maybe they do end up having a top 5 defense, that offense is really, really not good. How many opportunities are you going to get to use the Seahawks later this year? Not too many in my eyes. So I think even though it is a wildly popular spot, it's the right time to use Seattle because you're really not going to get another chance to use them. Interestingly as well, this podcast will be released after the outcome of this game, so I'm not sure what the Thursday Night Football outcome is at this point, but assuming the Bills as, 12-point favorites win, that's going to be a play that some people have, but it's not really a popular play to have your Thursday Night Football game be a survivor pick. People will definitely do it, right? Don't think it's going to be 0. But people tend to not get their picks in too early. It's a primetime game. Thursday nights can be weird. So it's very, very interesting to have your largest favorite of the week be on Thursday, not Sunday, and therefore not take a big percentage of the pool. So, maybe you'd put this at like a 5 or a 10% that use the Bills, and they should steamroll Miami. And I hope I don't sound like a fool when this actually comes out. But thinking, if you didn't know the dates and times of the games, you would not view Seattle -7 as the biggest, the most used team this week, right? You might guess the Packers, but despite Seattle being the most used team, I'm still going to use it. Again, I want exposure to the Packers. I want exposure to the Bills even. So using a couple different entries, I am going to do a couple different things. I also think it's a sneaky opportunity to use the 49ers. I think they should be able to beat the Cardinals again. Might not be what I do, but we are going to go with Seattle for our survivor pick this week. And that's going to do it for episode 3 of the Noise Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure you like and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, all the above. Rate and download the podcast on any of your streaming platforms, Apple, Spotify, YouTube as well. Make sure you like and subscribe. Wherever you're catching us on, we appreciate it. Leave your feedback in the comments below. Signing off, this is Max Yelson. Thanks for listening.